The courtroom was packed. It wasn't a high-profile case. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. Just another civil hearing over a land dispute involving a retired Navy SEAL named Marcus Reed and the city council over a condemned piece of property. But the moment Marcus walked in, people noticed. He didn't carry himself like a man defeated. His posture was straight, his gaze calm. Even in a worn gray suit, he looked like someone used to chaos and control. He sat quietly at the defense table, alone, no lawyer, just a thick folder of evidence and a military-issued ID tag clipped to his inner pocket. Across the room, Officer Bradley Kent watched him with folded arms. Tall, crew-cut, and always wearing a smirk, Kent had a reputation in the precinct for getting rough when he didn't like being challenged. He'd testified earlier in the trial, claiming Marcus had resisted inspection of the property, that he'd been aggressive, uncooperative, and a possible threat. But Marcus hadn't said a word, until today. As Judge Harland called the courtroom to order, murmurs died down. Then Marcus stood up. "Your Honor," he said, calm and even. "Before we proceed, I'd like to enter new evidence into the record. It concerns the arrest report filed by Officer Kent." Kent's jaw tightened. Harland adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." Marcus opened the folder. And then, the screens lit up. Security footage. Audio files. Time-stamped images. What happened next changed everything. The courtroom went silent except for the soft hum of the projector. On the screen, a grainy security cam angle showed a narrow alleyway, Marcus's condemned property. The timestamp was from 3 weeks prior, the day Officer Kent claimed Marcus had physically resisted inspection. But the footage showed something different. There was no confrontation. No resistance. Just Marcus unlocking the gate to let the officers in, standing with his arms behind his back the entire time. Kent was the one pacing aggressively, jabbing a finger into Marcus's chest. Then, in full view of the camera, he shoved Marcus backward hard enough to make him stumble into a pile of debris. A murmur rippled through the court. Officer Kent's attorney leaned forward, whispering frantically into his ear. But Marcus wasn't done. He pulled up an audio file next. "This is from the body cam," he said. "The original file was redacted in the city records. I recovered this copy from the local data center before it was wiped." Judge Harland raised his eyebrows. The audio played, echoing through the courtroom. Kent's voice: "I don't care who he was in the Navy. Out here, he's just another stubborn piece of trash getting in my way." Then a second voice, another officer: "He's not doing anything, Brad. Back off." Silence. Then Harland slowly looked over at Kent. "Officer Kent, care to explain this?" Kent stood up, red-faced. That's been doctored. He's manipulating it, this is a setup." "No," Marcus said, stepping forward. "It's the truth. I've worn a uniform most of my life. I've faced things most people wouldn't believe. And I didn't come here to fight anyone, just to clear my name." That's when Kent snapped. Without warning, the officer surged forward across the aisle and threw a punch, right there in court. But Marcus was faster. Gasps exploded around the courtroom as Officer Kent lunged. His fist came fast, wild and unrestrained, but Marcus had already shifted his weight. With one smooth motion, he sidestepped, caught Kent's wrist mid-air, and twisted it behind his back. The officer dropped to one knee with a grunt of pain. It all happened in less than 2 seconds. The bailiff drew his taser but froze when Judge Harland raised a hand. "Stand down," the judge shouted, rising from his bench. "Everyone, stay seated." Marcus released Kent gently, letting him slump to the floor, clutching his shoulder. He didn't gloat. He didn't say a word. He simply turned, buttoned his coat, and stood straight, like a man used to restraint. The courtroom was stunned. The prosecutor slowly stood. "Your Honor, that was a physical assault by a sworn officer, in this courtroom. Yes, it was, Harlan said grimly. And it changes the context of this entire case. Marcus cleared his throat, calmly. Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I'm not here to smear anyone. I just want the truth documented, for the record. Harlan stared at Marcus, then at the playback screen, frozen on the frame of Kent shoving him. He finally spoke, motion to dismiss the city's claims against Mr. Reed, granted. This court will also recommend an immediate inquiry into Officer Kent's conduct, both in this case and others. Kent looked up in disbelief. You're siding with him? No, Harlan replied. I'm siding with the truth. A ripple of applause began near the back benches. Several veterans had shown up in quiet support. Now they stood, hands over hearts, as Marcus gave them a single nod of thanks. But the story wasn't over yet. Outside the courtroom, someone had been watching the whole time. Someone who recognized Marcus, not just as a SEAL, but as something even bigger. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with questions. Reporters gathered like a wave, shoving mics and cameras forward, shouting over each other. Mr. Reed, do you have a statement? Are you pressing charges? Were you expecting the officer to attack you? Marcus didn't flinch. He gave a quiet shake of his head and moved down the steps without a word. But just as he reached the street, a sharp voice cut through the noise. Marcus Reed. He turned. A woman in her early 40s stepped forward from a black SUV. Elegant but serious, navy blue pantsuit, black heels, credentials tucked into a lanyard around her neck. Her presence alone silenced the crowd. I'm Director Ellen Trask, Office of Federal Investigations. Marcus gave her a slow nod. Ma'am. You made quite the impression in there, she said, folding her arms. What you exposed today, it wasn't just about your property. That officer you tangled with, he's been under review by Internal Affairs for over a year. But we could never get solid proof. Until now. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That right? She stepped closer. And that wasn't just any courtroom brawl. You handled it with precision. Discipline. You knew exactly how far to go without crossing the line. He said nothing. You're not just a retired SEAL, are you? He met her gaze. Depends who's asking. Trask smiled faintly. We've got bigger problems than dirty city cops. Problems that require someone who knows how to work quietly, surgically. Someone who doesn't rattle easily under pressure. What are you saying? I'm saying you've still got fight in you. And I'm offering you a way to use it. Marcus glanced back at the courthouse, at the fading echo of a battle he didn't start but refused to lose. Then he looked forward. All right, he said. I'm listening. Director Trask opened the SUV door and gestured for Marcus to get in. Inside, the windows were tinted, the interior sleek and quiet. A folder lay on the seat between them, thick, sealed, and marked, Level 6 clearance required. As the door shut, the city's noise faded away. Trask didn't waste time. She opened the folder and turned it toward him. 3 months ago, one of our field agents went dark. She was investigating a task force buried inside a major metropolitan police unit, unauthorized raids, forged warrants, assets going missing, files erased from state servers. Marcus skimmed the photos. Faces. Documents. Maps. You think this has something to do with Officer Kent? I don't think. I know. He wasn't just acting rogue, he was part of a protective detail connected to that task force. What happened in court wasn't personal. It was a message. Marcus sat back. Who else knows about this? Trask tapped the folder. Just you and me. And I plan to keep it that way. He closed the file. I left that world behind for a reason. You did, she said. But it didn't leave you. You don't go from breaching compounds overseas to fighting property claims in municipal court unless someone wants you silenced. She let the silence hang for a beat, then leaned in. You embarrassed the wrong people today, Marcus. If you walk away now, they'll make sure it's permanent. But if you work with us, we flip this. We take the fight to them. Marcus's jaw clenched. He looked out the window, watching as Kent was escorted out the back of the courthouse in cuffs. He didn't look like a man broken. He looked angry. Vengeful. Marcus turned back to Trask. I want names. You'll get them. I want to do this my way. Trask gave a slow nod. Then welcome back, Chief. By morning, Marcus Reed had disappeared. No press interviews. No follow-up hearing. The story of the courtroom assault made the rounds on social media, but without Marcus to comment, the media moved on. The official report cited unprovoked aggression by a city officer, and a heroic act of restraint by a decorated veteran. That was all. But behind the scenes, things moved quickly. Marcus was flown to a secure facility just outside Quantico. It wasn't listed on any map. The elevator to the underground complex required a biometric scan, retinal ID, and a voice command code only 2 people in the building knew, Trask, and now Marcus. Inside the command center, a wall-sized screen displayed the files from the folder, now expanded. Dozens of faces. Surveillance videos. Documents with blacked-out lines. Trask stood beside a shorter man in a beige sweater vest. This is Dr. Lowell. He's our intel architect. Everything we gather flows through his system. Lowell gave Marcus a polite nod. Big fan of your work overseas, sir. Especially that op in northern Sudan, Marcus raised a brow. You weren't cleared for that file. Lowell stammered, then looked to Trask. She smirked. Told you he doesn't miss anything. Marcus turned back to the screen. What am I looking at? An operation called Grey Mantle, Trask said. Unofficial. It's embedded in multiple police units across the country. Not military. Not federal. A shadow task force. Their mission? Control property seizures, eliminate whistleblowers, and funnel public funds through urban clearance projects. They've been careful, until you caught Kent slipping. Marcus stared at one face on the screen. It wasn't Kent. It was someone higher. Someone Marcus recognized from an old joint intel briefing years ago. Someone who was never supposed to be operating on U.S. soil. You're telling me he's involved? Trask nodded. And he knows you're coming. Marcus cracked his neck and smiled for the first time in days. Good. Marcus spent the next 48 hours in a secured war room buried beneath concrete and steel. No phones. No chatter. Just data, schematics, and strategy. Every name connected to Grey Mantle had a file. Some were local law enforcement officers. Others were city officials, judges, and even private contractors with access to surveillance infrastructure and weapons stockpiles. But one name sat at the top of the pyramid, Calder Rusk. A former military strategist turned private consultant, Rusk had disappeared from official records 10 years ago. But the face on the screen wasn't a mystery to Marcus. He'd seen it in Kabul, in Berlin, and once, just once, in a black site debriefing in Istanbul. Rusk didn't believe in wars with flags or rules. He believed in leverage. Control. Quietly positioning assets until an entire city could fall without a single shot fired. And now, it looked like he'd turned that theory into practice, inside the United States. Trask entered the room holding a flash drive. We found something, she said, plugging it into the terminal. Encrypted messages between Rusk's network and Officer Kent's bodycam upload system. Kent wasn't just part of the task force, he was feeding data into Rusk's system. Facial ID, drone footage, building schematics, Marcus's eyes narrowed. They were mapping my neighborhood. Trask nodded grimly. And yours wasn't the only one. A map lit up: Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, Charlotte. Every city had the same pattern: police-initiated code violations, followed by emergency response drills, followed by rapid redevelopment contracts tied to shell companies. They're wiping out communities from the inside, Marcus muttered. Trask gave him a hard look. You ready to put boots on the ground? Marcus didn't hesitate. Give me a team. No, she said. You'll go in alone. If you take a team, Rusk sees it coming. But one man. Especially one they thought they silenced. She leaned in. You'll be invisible. Marcus cracked his knuckles. Not for long. Night fell over Detroit like a black curtain. Cold, wet, and silent. Marcus moved like a shadow through the service tunnels beneath the old municipal records building. The city above had changed: glass towers, luxury condos, and development zones wrapped in branding and fences. But underneath, the bones were the same. Old steam systems. Forgotten crawlways. Rusted hatches that hadn't been opened in decades. Exactly what he needed. He reached a sealed utility door and knelt. Trask's team had embedded a signal booster in his jacket, encrypted mic, thermal body cam, and a pulse beacon only she could read. But no comms. Not for this phase. He pulled a small device from his pocket, an RFID sniffer, and held it to the lock. Click. Inside, the hallway was dim and humming with server racks, illegally wired to city power. Red lights blinked in sequence. A hidden surveillance hub. Marcus moved fast. He plugged in a clone drive Lowell had prepared. Within seconds, terabytes of data began to download: intercepted communications, property seizure orders, court documents marked classified from judges who didn't have that authority. And then, he froze. One file was labeled Operation Reclaim. He opened it. Live camera feeds flooded the screen. Dozens. Hundreds. Real-time footage from inside private homes, community centers, even schools. Facial recognition IDs were tagging residents, flagging them by influence risk, media exposure, and non-compliance. This wasn't about property. It was about control. Suddenly, Marcus heard a metallic click behind him. He turned. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure in a matte black tactical coat, silver pistol in hand. Didn't expect to see you here, Reed, the man said. It was Calder Rusk. Alive. Armed. And smiling. Marcus didn't move. Rusk stepped inside, lowering the pistol slightly, but not enough to be careless. His voice was calm, almost amused. I knew someone would come poking around. I just didn't expect it to be you. Marcus studied him. You always did like hiding behind walls and wires. I didn't realize you downgraded to basements. Rusk smirked. Still got that mouth. I wondered if Kent's little stunt in the courtroom would bait you out. Guess it did. Marcus kept one hand near his belt loop, where a compact flash blind was clipped just under his jacket. So what is this, Rusk? You spying on citizens now? Declaring martial law with corporate contracts and fake court orders? You think too small, Reed, Rusk said, stepping closer. This isn't about cities or people. It's about stability. I've built a new system, one that actually works. No bureaucracy. No elections. No delays. Just results. You mean fear. I mean order. You've seen what the world looks like without it. Marcus's fingers slowly tapped the side of his leg. 3, 2, 1. He twisted and flung the flash blind toward the servers. A brilliant white burst lit the room. Rusk staggered back, shouting. Marcus lunged, striking the pistol down with his left hand, then driving a clean elbow into Rusk's ribs. The weapon clattered to the floor. They clashed hard. Rusk wasn't just a planner. He could fight. But Marcus was faster, more precise. Years of tactical conditioning kicked in. Every movement had purpose. No wasted energy. Rusk reached for a blade at his ankle. Marcus blocked, twisted his arm, and slammed him into the server rack. Sparks flew. Rusk groaned as Marcus locked him in a chokehold, dragging him down. The room filled with smoke and alarm sirens. The download was complete. Marcus activated his beacon. Then he whispered into Rusk's ear. "You picked the wrong city." A black helicopter hovered over the rooftop of the abandoned courthouse minutes later. Marcus emerged from a hidden exit, dragging Calder Rusk by the collar, burned, bruised, and unconscious. A tactical recovery team in unmarked gear rushed forward, securing the perimeter as Director Trask stepped out of the chopper. She stared at Marcus for a long second before speaking. "You actually did it." Marcus dropped Rusk at her feet. "He's got files stashed all over the country. But the main drive's in your hands now." Trask nodded. "It's more than enough. With this, we can dismantle Grey Mantle from the inside out. Indictments, seizures, declassifications, it's all coming down." Marcus didn't smile. He just stood there, arms crossed, wind rustling his jacket. "Where's Kent?" he asked. "In federal holding. His attorney already flipped. Looks like your courtroom showdown exposed more than we thought." Marcus glanced toward the city skyline. "So what now?" he asked. Trask looked at him seriously. "That depends. You could walk. We'll seal your record again, and no one would know you ever stepped back in." Marcus paused. Then looked her in the eye. "No," he said. "We're not done. If this was happening here, it's happening somewhere else." A slow grin crept onto Trask's face. She extended her hand. "Then let's finish what they started." Marcus shook it. As the chopper lifted into the sky, the city below shrank, but his mission had only just begun. The man they tried to silence had returned. Not for revenge. Not for glory. But for justice. And this time, he wasn't backing down.